In 2013, I was afraid that we would lose the institutional knowledge we were gaining related to the tornado if we didn't find a way to write it down. So, for those of you who don't live here, you can tell I have some really awesome friends in Joplin, and I nagged them to the point that I had 47 of them write what they would tell someone in their community who was like them. And I turned that into an essay collection, so I'm not an author, I'm just an editor. But I put this collection of essays together, and it's called Joplin Pays It Forward. You can find it on the city website for free if you want to ever have a download on it, or you can buy it on Amazon for 99 cents because I couldn't figure out how to give it away on Amazon because it was hard enough to learn how to publish an e-Kindle book. But one of the essays that really touched my heart was from our next speaker, and that's David Mink. David was a reporter at the time of the tornado. And in going out, got asked the question, why don't you help? And it was a really great essay on what it was like to know the difference. And so I wanted David to be able to tell his story to you here today. David's covered the tornado since its beginning, and he's been certainly very thoughtful and very fair and very thorough in all his coverage. He graduated here from Missouri Southern, and I want to let David speak. I know he's, there you are, thank you. Ooh. I'm going to let David speak to you about that now.
My name is Dave Mink, and I feel bad. I'm following Gary here. I don't have a presentation with lots of slides. I do have a clicker though. I'm excited. I'm going to use this laser pointer at some point during the presentation. Yeah, am I not on? I just have to get a little closer. Okay. Forgive me. I'm also using some new technology. My name is David Mink. I'm the immediate former editor at Joplin Regional Business Journal. I started there in 2011, about 5 months before the tornado, but I have an extended career. I graduated from Missouri Southern in 2004. I got my English degree, and I've been in journalism ever since then. And, excuse me. I took speech here at Missouri Southern. And one of the things that my teacher always complained about, she liked my speeches, but she didn't like my style. She felt like I read a little bit too much, as opposed to being very conversational. But I'm a writer at heart, so if you catch me reading up here, I apologize. Joplin is my hometown. I grew up here, and today I own and live in the home that my grandparents helped raise us in. I've spent the better part of my life with a view of Shoal Creek and Low Water Bridge, and it suits me. It suits me just fine. A few years after the tornado, when this city and its citizens were still in the midst of recovery, Jane Cage contacted me. Most of you know Jane. She's talked to a lot of you today. She was one of the point people on the Citizens Advisory Recovery Team that the city established to forge the path forward. And she's one of the strongest forces behind the organization of this recovery conference. When Jane called me, she was putting together a book, Joplin Pays It Forward. It was a collection of writings from area authors that attempted to do on a much smaller scale exactly what we're doing here today. Share with the world the valuable information we've learned during our recovery. Joplin was a poster child for recovery. We bounced back almost immediately. Organized efforts came together on day one. Groups formed in the ashes to channel the immense volunteer effort, the thousands and thousands who flowed into Joplin to help us in our time of need. The city effort was united, focused first on cleaning up the wreckage and then on helping residents rebuild their lives. The things that our city, civic, and nonprofit leaders had learned were, as Jane saw it, valuable pieces of information that should be shared with other cities and communities. As a journalist covering the city's recovery, I heard this phrase a lot: there's no playbook for this. Recovering from a catastrophic natural disaster isn't something they train you for in civic education. No one knew what to do in the moments after the tornado, but they stepped up and made decisions. Some of those decisions were right, and some, in hindsight, were made in error. What Jane wanted to do was actually make that playbook, and she called me that day to ask me to write something for it. I gladly agreed. But afterward, I wondered what I could offer to that effort. I was a journalist. At the time, I had covered the tornado and its aftermath, and like so many others, I had grieved with the rest of my community at what had been lost. But I had led no efforts toward recovery. I had not risen to leadership as so many of my peers had. So what I wrote for Jane was a piece of advice to other journalists. I told them about my experience covering the tornado, about that first harrowing day of walking the destruction path and shooting photos of the wreckage of homes and businesses. I told them that I convinced myself that I was helping to record history that day, but that only in hindsight did I realize that meant neglecting to help my neighbors in their time of need. I'm proud of what I wrote that day. But on the 5th anniversary of the tornado, so many of the commemoration efforts have been about celebrating the recovery of the community, not reliving the destruction that made that recovery necessary. The piece I had written for Jane was powerful, but it didn't accomplish what I wanted it to do today, which was to focus on what this community, what these residents did right after the tornado. So here goes. I was a poet in college. It's something I've given up on as an adult, but back then it was an active channel for my creativity. And it wasn't just a simple pastime. I actually was published. My poetry appeared in several editions of The Winged Lion, MSU's former magazine for writing and visual arts. And one poem that I wrote was even published in a national collegiate anthology. It's that poem I'd like to talk about today. It was a poem that I wrote, surprisingly, about a girl. We'd been serious, had even lived together, but in the end she'd asked me to leave. It had been a year since then, and when I wrote the poem, I had come to a place of acceptance and forgiveness. My friends and I jokingly referred to it as my cheater poem, because while powerful in its message, the piece didn't have a lot of meat to it. It was 4 lines long and contained, no joke, a total of 8 words. The title itself wasn't even pronounceable. It was a series of blank spaces between 2 brackets. When I read it, I had to introduce it with my hands, like this. Now, folks, I've written a lot of poetry, and some poems that inside could even be called epic. When I sent off my submission packet to the Rectangle, the National Honor Society publication that the poem was published in, I even included some of those longer pieces. The types of poems where I really got to play with the language and roll around in my self-indulgence. You know, good college poetry. But the editorial board at the Rectangle didn't choose any of those poems. They chose this one. The next day, among the rubble, I am. It was a simple message, one that I conveyed in as few words as possible. It likely occurred to me all at once, popping into my head on the drive home from classes. I was never the type to labor over my words, writing and rewriting them until they did what I told them to. My friends called it my cheater poem for that reason. It was a fluke of chance that I happened to remember that bit of thought and jot it down in my war notebook. It took me almost no effort at all, equivalent to an afterthought, really, and it had achieved more success than any of my other work had done. But I know why the board at the Rectangle chose the poem. They chose it because, at its essence, my poem did what any good poetry is supposed to do: to distill a thought, an idea, or an emotion into a concise, intelligent, and playful pairing of words, to use small things to craft giant revelations. When I wrote, I was picking up the pieces of my life after one of the toughest breakups I'd ever been through. But what made the poem so great was that you didn't know that. You didn't know that the rubble I stood in the middle of was a pile of I lost the girl pity stones. What made the editors at the Rectangle pick this poem was that it could be about anything. It was ambiguous to the degree that anyone could read their own personal battle into its words. In 8 words, this poem conveyed a world of meaning. It cast the narrator against a backdrop of tragedy, making him or her a character struggling with loss and demons from the past. But in its final line, it reveals a narrator who's already finding hope in the tragedy, who is taking a breath in the wake of catastrophe and realizing that not all is lost. It took me 60 words to sum up that poem, for those of you who are here. When Jane asked me to take part in this conference, I found myself again wondering what I could contribute to the information exchange today. We're here to learn about recovery. We're here to share with each other what our disasters have taught us, in the hopes that between us we can come up with a foolproof method for disaster recovery. Again, I've done none of the technical work that our city leaders undertook after the tornado, and I know nothing about the logistics of emergency management. But I do understand the hearts of the people behind this recovery. Over the last 5 years, I've interviewed them and written countless stories about them and the things they've done. I've gotten to know them, understanding more and more with each interview what drove them to do what they did. Recovering from a disaster takes everything you have. It demands immense manpower, unparalleled coordination, and up all hours dedication. But the heart of disaster recovery isn't the playbook, the back pocket manual that tells you how many trucks you'll need or how to most efficiently coordinate 1,000 volunteers a day. The heart of recovery and the key to ensuring your community climbs up from its knees is this: I am. The people of Joplin, from the recovery leaders to the everyday average survivors, carried this with them. While they struggled with grief, they built up this stony resolve. An EF5 tornado had carved a mile-wide swath through their community, but it had not destroyed the strength of their sheer will. And the outpourings of love and aid from the world around us only gave the people of Joplin more resolve. We would not be stopped. This is what so many are celebrating this weekend. That five years later, we are still Joplin. We never gave up. We never let despair or weakness stop us from taking back what nature took away. If there's a single key to the recovery of your community, it's this spirit. You have to foster it, spread it through the community, and help it grow. You have to find it in yourself and display it for others until it spreads like a virus. This passion must be at the heart of everything else you do and everything your teams do. That's the secret to long-term recovery, embodying the spirit of strength and helping your citizens find that strength in themselves. It is not an easy road. I hope that none of you ever have to walk that road and shoulder these burdens. But remember the spirit today. And remember that forging a successful path to recovery is as much about how you shoulder your burdens as it is about how you solve them. Okay.